It does cause me pain.
But I don't see that. I don't see that. I want to see the Chris that cares.
In this video, I'll continue analyzing Chris Watt's interview with FBI agent Graham Coder and CBI agent Tammy Lee. I have an academic background in linguistics. I'm trained in statement and conversation analysis. I'll be using these two methods to make an in-depth analysis of Chris Watt's words. Both methods acknowledge that people tell the truth. We believe what people are telling us. The truth is dropped in the small bits and pieces of their language. We note these words and consider them in the overall investigation. This video has an educational purpose, and I hope you find it informative. Consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed, and make sure you're notified whenever I release a new video. In the comments, I'm often asked, well, how does it look when a subject's making reliable statements? Two categories to this. The first category is fluency, that the subject's tone of voice is calmer and has a flow to it. Instead of pausing, the subject speaking directly or more or less directly. Being direct shows us that what they're saying is not sensitive to them. When I use the word sensitive, it means not showing signs of wanting to withhold information. The second category is immediacy. Here we pay attention to linguistic dimensions such as overly convincing language, verbs such as promise, or adverbs such as absolutely. The reason for this is that words like these reveal that the subject's self-aware, when the subject should be worried about the missing loved ones instead. Also, immediacy covers the concept narrative balance. In a narrative, which is a situated representation of a series of related events, there's a prologue, a critical event, and an aftermath. The critical event is the most important part, and we expect it to contain details. If the critical event is undetailed or withheld, it's noted for undisclosed information. The subject's involuntarily showing us that what they're saying is sensitive to them, the exact opposite of the first category, fluency. With these two categories in mind, fluency and immediacy, let's listen to Chris's final utterance before I stopped the video last time.
Tell us about that night again, and please tell the truth. I told you the truth. I promise I've told you the truth. Like, I woke up at 4 o'clock. I woke up at 4 o'clock. Got dressed, got ready. 4:15, me and Shannon talk. About the house, about separation.
Chris starts with almost whispering before he makes a self-repair. So at the onset of this passage, he's being unassertive. Self-repairs occur when we look for a different way of phrasing our statements, typically to make them less direct. In this type of interview setting, subjects most often make self-repairs to make their statements less honest. They know that their words are carefully analyzed by the investigators, and paradoxically, it's this exact self-awareness that often ends up giving them away. Chris is highly self-aware in this short passage. We observe one more self-repair before he uses the overly convincing verb, promise. With "I've told you the truth," we get a repetition caused by his internal stress. We don't get new information. Chris is rehearsing which words to use. He begins with the prologue of his narrative, but already stumbles with his use of the first pronoun. He makes a self-repair to I after a 2-second pause, that is. After 2 more seconds, we get even more information pertaining to the prologue. With the next 2.5 seconds, we now have a 6.5 second pause all in all, before Chris gets to the critical event, the essential information. The critical event is undetailed and there's no aftermath. His narrative is incomplete, and he chooses to focus more on non-essentials than essentials. In the field of narrative analysis, Chris is called the focalizer, the one who experiences X. The X is called the focalized, the experienced. We expect descriptive verbs and telling details on the focalizer's part, but there isn't any. This narrative is noted for undisclosed information. The pauses may not seem very long, but in conversation analysis, it's recognized that in daily conversations, we're already worried about someone's opinion of what we said if they don't respond within 2 seconds of us saying it. Maybe we gave our opinion on something and expect some kind of reaction to what we said. What we just observed here was a break in both fluency and immediacy. And notice that we didn't conclude this based on one occurrence of a self-repair. Several linguistic elements pointed to this. Chris was obviously not speaking entirely from experiential memory. He was leaving out information. In the following, Coder continues expressing his distrust of Chris's accounts.
Can you understand that some of this just doesn't make sense to us? Okay.
We notice how fast Chris confirms Coder's distrust. This is another thing to look for in an interview like this. Agreeableness on the subject's part. Agreeing that it doesn't make sense. Chris even says, I know, not just I can. He knows this sounds strange. Agreeing with Coder that this doesn't appear to make sense undermines the times that Chris has tried to sound assertive.
I don't know where they're at. Honestly, I do not know where they are at. If I could have my babies back home right now, I would. I want them back. I want everybody back. That is the God's honest truth.
Getting Chris to indirectly undermine his own previous statements could be the reason why Coder asked the question in the first place. Chris resorts to his non-fluent way of answering questions when Coder asks him this.
How is it possible that a woman and 2 kids are just completely gone off the face of the earth?
I promise you, I have nothing on my hands I did nothing to those kids or her to make them vanish.
So tell me what happened then. I believe you that you did nothing on your hands.
Overall, there's a disconnection between Coder's question and Chris's answer. Coder's asking Chris a hypothetical, albeit a rhetorical question, and after 3 seconds to think about his wording, Chris jumps to defending himself. In linguistics, we distinguish between locutionary and illocutionary speech acts. When you ask someone, can you open the window? This is called the locution. This is just the question itself. However, there's an illocutionary force at play in this question, because you don't want a simple yes or no answer. You want the person to actually open the window. So overall, this question is actually a polite request. Coder's question is the locution, the question itself, but Chris is responding to the illocutionary force in the question, that it's improbable that his family has just disappeared. Chris's self-awareness in reacting to this accusatory illocutionary force reveals to us that he feels cornered. The agents have Chris right where they want him. Chris says promise, a recurring word in his vocabulary, as we've seen in previous videos. Promise is a performative verb that signals intention. It's a high sensitivity word because it shows self-awareness on the subject's part, a way of sounding persuasive as opposed to actually persuading. We note the self-repair, a lack of fluency, before Chris says, I have nothing on my hands. The term, a comfortable lie, is coined for a reason. Since the brain contains our experiential memory, it causes internal stress when we try to subvert that memory by lying. However, the brain also helps us find the least stressful way of phrasing our lies. This is the paradox. Here, we notice this dual process. On one hand, Chris brings attention to his hands. He could have chosen many other expressions, but he chose this one. This likely speaks to his experiential memory about what he in fact did to his family with his hands. On the other hand, Chris phrases his experiential memory as comfortably as he can. He uses present tense, making his statement technically true, because right now, in this moment, he doesn't have anything on his hands. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't had anything on his hands in the recent past. Coder snarls at this expression. Maybe he finds it strange or revealing too. Chris sounds like he's about to modify and thus weaken his own assertion. But then a self-repair comes in. Those kids and her are obviously distancing terms, atypical for a presumed caring father and husband, but in line with the other instances of this specific word choice for his family.
It's like, I love those kids with all my heart. Those are my life. I helped make those kids. There's nothing in my life that means more to me than these kids. There's nothing you could do to cope with that, to make me cope with that, if those kids are not okay.
In the following, notice Chris's continuing unassertiveness.
What happened?
When I left, I mean, it's on video that I left and I was in my truck. I didn't load anything into my truck besides my tools, my container, my book bag, my water jug, my lunchbox.
A self-repair and a hedge initiate his response. So already there's a lack of assertiveness, a lack of desire to spontaneously present his narrative. He's looking for the proper wording instead of just narrating.
Okay, but then what happened?
I drove out of the driveway.
No, before you drove out of the driveway. What happened with your wife and your kids?
I didn't do anything like that. They were still in the house.
Where are they? Where did they go?
I don't know, sir. I really don't know.
Chris makes this formal address when he feels pressured.
Why didn't you call 911?
I didn't think anything was wrong.
I think you knew what was wrong.
I did not know what was wrong, sir. I promise you that.
What do you think it's going to look like when someone finds out that it was not you that called 911?
Snan took him to a friend's house.
Why wouldn't they go to daycare?
I am not sure. Honestly, sir, I am not sure.
Politeness in a stressful situation, especially when you're the suspect, is a red flag in statement analysis. Innocent people would be too upset to be this polite. Next, pay attention to how Tammy asks Chris if it was an accident and how Coder plays along. The agents do this to give Chris leeway to admit his crime. Admitting to an accident is easier for a subject than admitting to a premeditated action.
She didn't leave because she wanted to.
Right.
So what happened?
I didn't do anything to her or the kids.
Was it an accident?
I didn't do anything.
Was it an accident?
There was no accident. I don't know if there was an accident in the house. I wasn't there for it.
It's a big deal if it's an accident, because we can work with that, Chris.
Chris engages in lexical reuse. This is when one of the speakers in a conversation uses the words of another speaker. In daily conversations, this is a subconscious rule of politeness. Here, Chris uses it for self-serving reasons. With his conditional clause, he opens for the possibility that there was an accident, while at the same time removing himself from the location of the possible accident, the house. Opening for this possibility is a way out for Chris.
No, and I think that's maybe what happened.
I did not cause an accident. I didn't do anything to my wife and kids.
Was it a misunderstanding?
There's no misunderstanding. We had that talk. There was a misunderstanding where I didn't tell her about the affair.
Okay.
I didn't. That was the misunderstanding.
Sure. Miscommunication,
Yeah,
misunderstanding.
yeah.
Good.
But I probably should have told her right then, honestly. I mean, everything was out on the table anyways.
Right.
I should have just told her right then. But I didn't, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
Once again, we observe lexical reuse. Initially, Chris denies there was a misunderstanding. After a 2-second pause, however, he reuses Coder's noun misunderstanding, but notice that he places it in another context. This is not the context of his family's disappearance, but the context of the affair, which in itself is a euphemism for infidelity. He puts vowel stress on that, implying that using the word misunderstanding in the context of his family's disappearance is wrong. He then uses this new context to quote-unquote criticize himself, acting as if this is what's been bothering him. The shifting of context resides under the category of evasive answers, covert practices that occur all the time in especially the political arena, but also in police interviews. This is also called false guilt admission. The subject aches to agree with the distrusting investigators about something because they themselves know they're on thin ice.
I just find it hard to hear you talk about just having this emotional, conversation with Shanann, and you're bawling and crying together, and you have not shed one tear in 2 days that you've been here. Not one. And help me understand that, because I don't get it. These are your baby girls, and you have not shed one tear over them not being around.
Chris is at a loss for words. With her assessment, Tammy has now completed her turn constructional unit, her first pair part as we call it. When you're talking to another person, the two of you engage in first pair parts and second pair parts. When you ask a question, you expect an answer in return, and when you give an assessment, you expect some kind of acknowledgement from the other person. Here, 3 seconds pass without Chris's acknowledgement.
Over them not being around.
In my opinion, this is one of the most defining moments in all of the CBI and FBI interviews. Numerous times, Chris has tried to reassure the agents that he's truthful, and he's been worried about Coder's opinion of him. However, Chris's lies are intellectually based strategies that are very stressful and complicated for the brain to keep applying for hours at a time. When Tammy brings up the simple issue of feelings, Chris has no answer, because it's too late for him to display his feelings. They should have been immediate. He can't talk his way out of this one, and this obviously poses a problem for him, for his cunning personality type. It's as if he hadn't thought of displaying his feelings, and that's the thing. Feelings are not an intellectual process, they're spontaneous. Chris can't control them, but this doesn't stop Chris from trying to imitate emotions. Listen to his unconvincing sad voice.
Chris, I lose my 4-year-old in the store for 10 seconds and I start to go panic. Panic. I have not seen any of that from you at all. Help me understand that.
I love those girls. I would never do any just because I haven't shed a tear. Like, you get
no, that's weird. Is that weird?
Don't look into that like I don't love my kids, I love my wife.
Explain to me.
Chris is an imitator. We observed this earlier with his lexical reuse, and now we observe it with his attempts at sounding emotional. Every time the agents bring up a particular word that he hasn't admitted to, or a particular action that he hasn't shown them yet, he immediately tries to use said word in a new context, or fake said action, as he does here by sounding sad. As a demonstrative pronoun, those implies distance as opposed to the expected possessive pronoun my. He can't complete his denial, but makes a self-repair. Would never is an unreliable denial, because it's non-committal and generalizing, as in not specific to the crime he's questioned about. It doesn't mean that he didn't do anything, it means that he wouldn't do it. It's a way of lying without lying to yourself, without betraying your moral values, if you have any. It's especially sensitive because he's used this way of phrasing his denials before this interview.
Because this is something that I would never do. Ever.
We hear minimization, even though not having shed a tear is indeed strange. Conversely, Chris has found time to laugh.
I'm sure you don't mind if we take a break for the night. I'm sure that you are feeling some of the pressure from me. Okay?
You're doing your job, though.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't grill you a little bit, right? Okay.
I've seen you tell 2 different guys. Like, honestly, like I've seen like where you're smiling, and I've seen where it's different.
Yeah.
I can, yeah. You're doing your job, though. Like, I can't fault you for anything you've asked.
He switched topics again. First, he said he would never do anything. Now, he's talking about love. It's conceivable that he can't bring himself to repeat his attempt at a denial. Also, notice how he phrases his quote-unquote love. He doesn't actually say he loves them. He phrases this in the negative, and it's prefaced with the imperative don't. So this is Chris trying to persuade Tammy, not Chris expressing actual love for his family.
You're crying with your wife that you're leaving her,
Yeah.
but you don't cry that your 2 little baby girls
I'm hoping they're still around somewhere. I'm hoping they're still somewhere.
Yeah, but you
alive.
don't have them right now. You're
I
not
know.
reading stories to them at night.
I know.
You're not giving them midnight snacks. You're not giving them their medicine. You're not waking up with them in the morning.
I know this. Like,
So that should cause you pain.
It does cause me pain.
But I don't see that. I don't see that. I want to see the Chris that cares. I want to see the Chris that, feels bad about what he did and wants to, get this off his chest and be done with this. And let us find your little girls so that they're not out there in the middle of a field or whatever somewhere. Like, don't do that.
Notice what Tammy does here. The Chris that cares is no longer applied in the context of Chris not displaying emotions, but in the context of a presupposition that because he hasn't displayed emotions, he knows where his family is. In other words, she's making it clear to Chris that it's too late for him to sound and act emotional.
I love those girls to death.
Then show us that. Show us that.
This is the second time Chris links his family to the concept of death. This time it's the noun. Previously it was the verb.
No matter if me and my wife separate or not, or divorce or anything, I never wish harm on anybody, on a human being in general.
Okay.
Like, just seeing that picture, like, I want them just to run through that front door and just grab me, or just just tackle me, knock me to the floor, bust my head up, I don't care. The amount of love I have for my family is exponential, and it's never going to die.
As I mentioned earlier, the brain contains our memory, and said memory will manifest in small bits and pieces of a person's language.
Show us this Chris, not this Chris.
I'm not showing you that. I'm showing you the Chris that cares about his girls and his wife. Just because I haven't shed a tear, it shouldn't make you feel like that the love isn't there for them.
In a previous interview, Coder introduced the idea of two Chris's, a good side and a bad side. By setting up the idea of two Chris's, the agents indirectly give Chris leeway to speak as the quote-unquote other Chris, which can make it easier for a subject to confess their crime. The thing that's worth noting here is that Chris once again presupposes this idea in his answer, and at this point in time, he has already agreed with the idea.
Tale of two Chris's, okay? And you need to help me know which Chris I'm looking at today, and which Chris you really are.
And the Chris you're looking at is the man who loves these kids and loves his wife and will never, ever, ever do anything to harm them. That's the Chris you're looking at right now. The Chris you're looking at right now wants these kids and his wife back at his house right now.
After that, can you just come straight here?
Yeah.
Let's talk, let's get everything out of the way, let's get done with your search, and then we're just gonna, send you on your way, and we'll be back to this Chris, the good Chris, right?
Okay.
I'm sorry you have to go through all this.
It's part of the process.
Okay.
That the subject's willing to accept this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde version of their personality is a strong indicator of guilty knowledge. Innocent people would strongly reject such an idea. 2 times he reuses Tammy's verb show, only now in its present participle form. Paradoxically, it's this reuse that makes Chris's statement sound like an act. It suggests self-awareness and something intentional on Chris's part. He creates further distance to his family. He doesn't say I or my, he says that cares and his. We hear minimization again before he phrases his alleged love in the negative. Notice, he doesn't say that the love is actually there for them.
It's weird. It doesn't make sense to me.
I understand that.
You have to...
I totally see where you're coming from. Trust me, there's nothing...
Once again, he agrees that his own behavior is weird, which is weird. He says he can totally see where Tammy's coming from, but his following self-repairs and inability to qualify this statement reveals that he's at a loss for words.
Just because
Chris, people can be pushed to the point where they do something that they regret. It happens every single day.
I know.
But part of what makes you a man is the guy that goes, I really up, but this is what I did, and I'm going to pay for what I did, and I'm going to tell you what I did, and I'm going to be honest about it.
Tammy makes this a gendered issue, trying to make Chris feel like less of a man unless he confesses. It's a strategy that works on some male subjects, typically if they already feel inferior. A quick digression, it's interesting to notice that what allegedly defines a real man is dependent on the specific situation, if it benefits someone else or if it benefits a bigger cause. It's an expression that's often used opportunistically. As a result, it now has so many definitions that it's hard to appeal to it as an objective or absolute definition. Next, notice how Coder immediately steps in to reassure Chris. Chris is bombarded with different impressions all the time. He has the oftentimes more direct Tammy on his left side and the oftentimes more comforting Coder on his right. Chris is thrown off balance. Notice the shifts between Coder and Tammy in this next excerpt.
Chris, we can keep talking to you once we find these girls, okay? So once we find these girls and your wife, right? No matter how we find them, no matter what condition they're in, we can keep talking to you and you can tell us, guys, it's not as bad as it looks. And you can say, let me tell you what happened. I was never comfortable with you, Graham, or with you, Tam. No, I wasn't comfortable yet, but now that everything's known, now that these girls are found and Shanann's found, however they're found, it's okay. We can keep talking to you. Okay?
Chris, did Shanann do something to them?
No, I don't know.
I'm serious.
I have no clue.
No, you would have known, because they didn't leave the house.
Like, when,
Did Shanann do something to them, and then did you feel like you had to do something to Shanann?
No, they were at the house when I left. They were there.
They weren't there. They didn't leave. They vanished.
They were
The
there.
only way they could have left is in your truck.
There's no way, because, like, I didn't just throw them in my truck. But
You know your truck has GPS,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because you told your boss, like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to separation, or maybe staying
Yeah.
at a friend's house, whatever. You know that thing pings every 10 seconds?
Yep.
So we will know
You can't turn it off.
I know.
And
where
your-
you went.
And your company's giving that to us.
I know.
Okay. Are we not asking the right questions, Chris?
No, you're asking all the questions.
What are we not asking you right? What are we doing wrong?
You're not doing anything wrong.
Did Shanann do something?
I don't think she did anything to these kids. We both love them with all our hearts. There's no way.
In the following, pay attention to how Tammy again offers Chris leeway to tell them what happened, by blaming it on Shanann.
I mean, I want to believe that maybe Shanann did it and you felt compelled to fix this so Shanann didn't look bad. That's what I want to believe. But I don't know, you're not telling me that, so it makes me think the worst. Like, did you
I
do
did
that
not do
to
anything.
all three of them?
I did
Like,
not do anything to these kids. Did not do anything.
what did Shanann do to them? Tell us, Chris. Chicks are crazy.
Chris only reacts with the denial when Tammy brings up the possibility that Chris killed all three of them. It's likely that Chris sees something he can use in Tammy's statement. Next, we should consider the possibility that the subject's stalling by wanting to speak to one of their family members. Often, this is a way of buying more time to come up with a story.
Can I talk to my dad or something?
Absolutely.
Come.
Do you want to bring him in here?
No, I just can't talk to my dad. Like, he flew across the country.
Hey, Chris,
I can't.
how about this? If we brought your dad in here, would you please tell him what happened?
Can I just go talk to him? I've been in here for like 5-6 hours and I'm like,
Absolutely. Chris, look at me, man. It's not going to feel any better. He deserves an answer.
It's your best friend.
There's only one person you wanted here most, and it's your dad.
good.
Now, notice how Coder uses Chris's dad to express his own opinions. The agents are using pathos to the extreme.
What would you tell him?
I love him and I just want him to be by my side.
Okay. He knows more than we do that you're a good man. And he knows you want to protect your wife, Shannon. I think he would tell you to do the right thing.
In my opinion, Coder realizes that Chris may be trying to buy more time. No matter what, he doesn't let Chris get away so easily. Listen to this.
Before we get him,
Can I go out there and talk to him?
well, I don't know that you want to do it out there because there's a lot of people going through the halls. Should we bring him in here?
We'll step out. Okay?
Do you need a few minutes with him?
Okay.
Okay. Can we just ask a couple more questions? It seems like you're about to get it off your chest. Is there any way that you can help us understand more about Shanann and why maybe something happened, so that we don't get a bad picture about her? And what I mean is, what happened that night with her?
Pay attention to how Chris responds to Coder's "what happened that night with her." This is an easy to understand question, but Chris doesn't seem to think so, or maybe more likely, pretends to not think so.
As far as like after I talked to her,
With the girls.
like when we were having that conversation in bed there.
Mm-hmm.
2 times Chris answers Coder's question with other questions. Before answering a question with a lie, a deceptive person will often try to avoid answering the question overall. This can be done by answering questions with questions. This is one of the main areas of statement analysis. In the following, notice the lack of details in Chris's narrative about the conversation between him and Shanann.
Like when I talked to her about the separation and the house, and she asked me about the affair, and
Okay.
that's how that conversation went.
Okay.
She was distraught. She had like mascara running down her face, all that. I mean, it was emotional.
Well, how about this?
We notice his inability to complete his narrative grammatically. He initiates a time clause, but this clause is not directly followed by a main clause. I say directly because one might argue that she was distraught initiates the main clause. However, this doesn't follow from neither his word choice nor intonation. The paratactic conjunction "and" initiates a new sentence in the utterance, a closing, and his intonation on the final word "went" is downwards.
That's how
In
that
light of this,
conversation went.
the "she was distraught" part of his utterance is new information. Chris is again not speaking fluently. He's taken much time to recollect simple and very general events. He's not giving any new information, and his lack of details is incongruent with the expected narrative balance. The agents leave and Chris's dad enters. I'll leave this interview for now.